Joining us now, junkscience.com editor and founder, Steve Milloy. $150 billion a year. Events cost the United States. The more hysteria they will hustle, the more panic they will peddle, because there is no crisis, there is no catastrophe. Deaths are down 100% over the last century because of climate disasters.
Yeah, so the climate crisis is entirely made up. Joe Biden says that global warming is worse than nuclear war. Since we've been using fossil fuels, we've gone from a global population of less than 1 billion to more than 8 billion. People living longer, healthier, wealthier, freer lives than ever before. The earth is greener than ever before. We're doing great. This notion that climate change is causing more damages is completely false. There are more people living in riskier areas. So, yes, of course, damages have gone up. There's nothing good coming out of Joe Biden's climate policies. They've been inflationary. Even the Bank of England came out yesterday and said that these green policies, climate policies, net zero is inflationary. And we've seen that here. We've seen gasoline prices skyrocket. Electricity prices are going up. Joe Biden has tried to force the EV agenda down the throats of car makers. Ford lost $30,000 on each EV sold last year. This year will be worse. GM has had to abandon its EV plans for 2024. It's just been a disaster.
And with all the pain it causes on the American people, on the world, they don't want to change course. They're going to stay on it. But, Steve, I also want to get your take on this. While the White House is bragging about all the money it's throwing at climate initiatives, what they don't tell you is most of it's going to just 5 big states. California, Florida, New York, North Carolina, and Washington State are raking in half of all the climate grant money, while rural Americans miss out. 24 smaller states combined are being awarded less than 5% of all the overall cash. States like where I come from, rural Wisconsin, rural Virginia, places that also EVs don't really work because it's so rural. There's no charging stations and EVs don't work. What do you make of the study?
Well, of course, these big states, California, New York, Washington, Oregon, Florida, North Carolina, they're big, they're wealthy states. They've got huge green climate bureaucracies, even in Florida. And so they're able to apply for the money. And because it's not just free money. There's got to be some matching from the states. Smaller states, right. They don't have the bureaucracy to stay up on top of what's going on in Washington, D.C. They don't have the extra money to do the matching with, so they lose out. So California gets all the money, New York gets all the money, Florida gets the money, North Carolina. It's just the big guys can afford the time and the money to get more money, so they do.
And this is just a sliver of the money that's being doled out. This is just the building resilient infrastructure and communities funding. Moving on to this one last thing, you mentioned electric vehicles. Climate activists are pushing EVs with the promise that they not only save the planet, but your budget as well. But there's a new study by the Texas Public Policy Foundation that found that the hidden cost in going green will hit your wallet. It's just wildly more expensive than anybody imagines. Yeah. That when factoring in equipment, charging losses, and subsidies over 10 years, the true cost of fueling an electric vehicle is roughly $17 per gallon. But we have to note that the actual EV owner pays less than 7% of that. The vast majority of that cost is shouldered by, say, subsidies from the government.
Yeah, so over 10 years of driving an EV, taxpayers, both on a federal and state level, will subsidize that EV, just a single EV, to a tune of $50,000, which, as you pointed out, works out to about subsidizing a gas-powered car for $17.33 a mile. It's just crazy. I mean, we're paying people to drive these EVs, which are not accomplishing anything. They're not changing the climate. They're not improving the weather. They're not cheaper to run, even for the individuals. It was actually cheaper to buy pre-Biden gasoline, Trump era gasoline at about in the $2 range. It was actually cheaper to buy that than to charge an EV. So, we need a complete regime change so we can get gasoline prices back down to a reasonable range. And that'll be the final death knell for the EVs.
Well said, Steve Milloy. Always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.